Hello, this is how to install and use the Microsoft Applications Sysinternals Process Explorer, procexp.exe. This is how the application looks like. It has a tree of processes, and for the selected process has details, threads, DLLs, handles. Handles meaning open files, for instance. And then a huge properties dialog for each process. I install Sysinternals suite and then from there I use Process Explorer. You could either download just procexplorer.zip, it's an archive that contains just this application Process Explorer, or search for Sysinternals suite and it's a zip file for your operating system. I'm using the default version, which is Sysinternals suite.zip. Being a zip file, you don't need to install it. It's portable. Let's extract it. This is how the directory looks like, and we're going to move the directory from my user's home directory and then downloads directory to a more permanent location, which is in my case c:\temp and then bin directory. Many graphical user interface applications and other applications are command line applications. I make sure that in Windows File Explorer the main list view for files and directories is sorted alphabetically by name, and then I just start writing the name of the application. So it's procexp, this thing, procexp.exe. This is how it looks like. This is the tree of processes. Similar to Unix operating systems, also in Windows there's a tree of processes in the sense that this search host.exe was started by this sbc host.exe. When you create a process, you can specify that the created process is not part of this tree and it's a top-level process, like this Firefox did. But implicitly, when you create a process, it becomes child process of the parent process, the process that started the current process. That's why most of the processes are children of this win-init.exe, meaning Windows init, so something similar to PID1 in Unix. I'm not sure if we're elevated. Let's try to be elevated. So if we're elevated in the application's title bar at the end, within round parentheses, it will say administrator. If we're not elevated in the title bar, there will be no round parentheses and then administrator at the end of the title. So we probably always want to be elevated if you have the required rights on the computer. Do try to elevate it as administrator if you can. If not, then you're going to work with what you have. Okay, now if we look at the properties of the win-init process, it doesn't complain that it cannot read information from it. Error opening file, so it cannot open the file. Yeah, but we have some information. Okay, so this is the process with PID. What is the PID? 884, and says that was started by the parent process 800, but then the process 800 has stopped. You can sort by the column process ID, and you can see that there's no process with process ID 800. In most operating systems, the process IDs are not strictly ascending. So after some time, there might be a new process created, and that might receive, for instance, the process ID 800. As far as I know, Windows also doesn't guarantee the fact that the process IDs of the processes that have stopped will not be recycled and used for new processes. When you sort by process, once alphabetically ascending, twice alphabetically descending, 3 times, so the third time it's going to show the tree of processes. Let's look at so this is the main view. It's a tree view or a list view with processes, has columns, process name. So that would be not the executable name. Or is it the executable name? Yes, it's the executable name. So the name of the file. That's the entry point of the process. Except some very special processes like memory compression, interrupts, system registry, system idle process. The other default columns, CPU, you probably have started Process Explorer application because you have an application that's taking 100% of your CPUs, or you want to know which of the processes uses the most of CPU. So that's similar to the Linux command top. Or maybe you want to see if your video player or your web browser on your laptop is taking too much energy by playing back YouTube videos in a hardware accelerated fashion or in a software accelerated version. So using the GPU or not. Okay, this would be something like random access memory usage per process, but in all operating systems, it's incredibly hard to actually say which of the bytes that are being used by processes in the random access memory belong to which process. Process ID, and then we have description and company. You can add more columns. So on this row where the columns are, you can go right click and then select columns. So you can have, for instance, the image path such that we can see the full path of the executable, and then we can have command line. And we can, for instance, remove the description column. Command line tends to be really long, so make sure that this column is the last one. Path is less than max path, usually less than 250 characters, so you can have that at the penultimate column. Most of these processes that have as company name Microsoft Corporation are actually first-party processes, so built into Microsoft Windows operating system. But then also this one is part of the operating system, but then we have access is denied, although we're the user administrative user, that's part of the user group administrators, and the process is elevated. Okay. Let's sort by path. This is a useful way to separate the applications that are part of the Windows operating system from the processes that are part of applications that we have installed after installing the operating system. You can go to the list of installed applications by right-clicking on the Start menu and then go Installed Apps. It will open the Settings application in Windows. Go to Apps and Installed Apps. So these are first-party Metro-style applications or Windows Store applications, Calculator, Camera, Cortana. If you uninstall them, they will reappear once you install a newer version of Windows. And you do that frequently, at least every 6 months. These applications are not really uninstalled. They're just removed from the list of applications that the current user can start. Okay, and then there's more classical non-Metro style Windows applications such as the Visual Studio Installer, which I have installed, Mozilla Firefox, Python, Total Commander, Visual Studio Community. And the rest of the applications are either dependencies of these or built in to the Windows operating system, such as Xbox Live and Xbox. Okay, we can see if we look at the full path of the executable that some full paths contain c:\program files instead of containing c:\Windows. And then it's immediately visible that they're not a Microsoft application because it says c:\program files /Mozilla, which Mozilla is a corporation that's not Microsoft. And you can also see in the company name column. This Sysinternals application, Process Explorer, is actually owned by Microsoft Corporation, and the developers are Microsoft employees. So in my opinion, the company name field for the Process Explorer application should be Microsoft Corporation, not sysinternals --www.sysinternals.com. This is another type of application. This is the Microsoft Edge web browser graphical user interface control, which is related to Google Chrome. So it's a rendering engine, and it's installed in this interesting path. So not in c:\Windows, but in c:\program files x86, which means that this process might be 32-bit only or 32-bit and 64-bit. So c:\program files and then in parentheses x86. And then Microsoft, the corporation name. There's the bulk of processes is this process svc host.exe. The full path of the file is c:\Windows /system32.svc host.exe. So this is a small executable that is the entry point for the most of the Windows services, which are these things. So similar to systemd units of type service. Some of these are started automatically. There's this button, Open Services, which goes to services.scm. You can also open services.scm by going right-click on the Start menu and then Run. This guy. You can hide this useless left-hand side toolbar, and then you can look at some of the processes. Workstation is the Windows Shares client, and server is the Windows Shares server. So Windows Shares in the sense of Samba, SMB, CIFS, Remote Registry, Remote Service Control Manager, Remote Printing, Windows Update. We can see that it's not started when Windows starts because it has startup type manual. And we can also see that it's not running now. Status is not running. Windows services have a service name, which some of the services have really short names without spaces. And then a name that's human readable, which is called a display name. And then there's a longer description. And we can see that the executable file, that's the entry point of this process, is actually svchost.exe. And then as command line parameters has this -k space net svc space -p. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the correct command line. No, there needs to be more than this because local service doesn't mean much, and -p doesn't mean much, and -k doesn't mean much. If you hover on top of the process, you can see some details. And for SVC host processes, you immediately want to know which of the Windows services is being hosted here. Again, if we just look at the command line, that's not evident. It just says network service. And then that's it. Whereas in fact, it's the domain network service or DNS client with a bit of cache. For certproc service, certprop service, that's more evident what this process, which of the Windows services it hosts, because we can look at the command line and it says -s certprop service. So SVC means service, prop means propagation, cert means certificate. But again, if we hover with Process Explorer with a mouse on top of the process, we can immediately see that it's host svc.exe is hosting the Windows Service Certificate Propagation certprop SVC. But if you go properties, then we get additional information. So we often need to use Process Explorer if a process is taking a ton of CPU. That process is from the file svchost.exe, and you want to know exactly which of the Windows services that are hosted inside are causing a ton of CPU usage. And there's even svchost.exe processes that host 10 Windows services, and you actually want to know which of the Windows services you need to restart, for instance, because it's taking a ton of memory. For instance, this guy. It hosts 4 Windows services: contact data, sync host, user data access, and user data storage. How I did it previously was to go to threads, and in here I could see so what my usage was. My computer was not responsive, CPU was used 100%. I started Process Explorer. I saw that I sorted descending by CPU usage. One of the processes was taking 100% of CPU. That process was svchost.exe, but it was hosting many Windows services inside. So what I did, I went to Properties and then went to the Threads tab and sorted by CPU descending. I saw again 100% usage on just one of the threads. And on that thread, I saw that the entry point was, so the entry point being DLL, question mark, and then the function, C programming language function exported by that DLL. And it was immediately evident to me that it was Windows Update, Compat-Tel Runner, so the machinery in the Windows operating system that decides if Windows updates are missing, if newer versions of Windows are available and can be installed on the current computer. I couldn't actually use my computer for 10 minutes because Windows was deciding if new updates should be installed on this computer or if a new version of Windows is available and should be installed on my computer. What I did was I saw that Windows Update does things that I don't really like, because I don't really like Windows Update to install updates automatically. I can install them whenever I want. I stopped that process. The process will immediately start again because it's part of a Windows service. And meanwhile, while that happened, I try to start as fast as possible local group policy. The machine is not joined to an Active Directory domain. It's Windows 11 Pro. So I'm going to enable the group policy to disable automatic updates. So that's local group policy editor, local computer policy, computer configuration and administrative templates, Windows components, Windows update, and then manage end user experience, configure automatic updates. And I made the local group policy configure automatic updates to be disabled, which means that updates will not be downloaded automatically by Windows, will not be checked for automatically by Windows, will not be applied automatically by Windows. So no automatization for Windows updates. If I want to install the Windows updates, I just go to the Windows Start menu, write update in here, and I go check for updates. And that's it. Okay. Let's now see how we can find, for instance, this process. The list of processes is pretty large. There's 150 processes, and also the list of Firefox processes is pretty large. But I want to know exactly the process that's hosting this, for instance, this title bar. For that, we have this button, Find Windows Process, drag over window. And now we know that the parent Firefox process, so the first Firefox process that's being started, in this case, process ID 7852, is actually handling the probably the Windows main loop, thread 1, and the graphical user interface presentation window. We can close this process. If we go kill process, it automatically closed all of the children processes. But in order to be extremely sure on Windows that the children processes will be closed correctly, instead of going right click and kill process, I go right click and kill process 3. Killing a process is an extreme measure. You should always try to close the application, not kill it. But if the application is not responsive, the operating system is not responsive, if there's an infinite loop, etc., sometimes it's faster to kill some processes than to restart Windows. Kill process 3 on procexp.exe. Back to starting Process Explorer, procexp.exe. We can see that processexplorer.exe is the process that we have started, but it immediately started another process, processexplorer64.exe, procexp64.exe. This is a 64-bit process, whereas this one is a 32-bit process. How can we prove that? Let's see. We need a column similar to architecture, ISA, CPU, this guy. Okay, processexplorer.exe runs on all Intel x86 architecture Windows operating systems, both on 32-bit and 64-bit. Process Explorer 64-bit runs only on Windows 64-bit. But Windows Explorer 64-bit can do some things that the 32-bit process cannot do at all, or can do but in really complicated ways. Like 64-bit processes can always see the entire Windows registry, whereas 32-bit processes are by default not shown the actual Windows registry, but a view of the Windows registry that's showing, for instance, in HKey local machine software, it's showing the Windows on Windows 6432 view. Let's see that. So this is registry editor 64-bit, HKey local machine, software, and then this is the Windows registry key that's used for 32-bit software instead of this one. So if you read this Windows registry key from a 32-bit process, it actually reads from this Windows registry key. But if you're a 64-bit process, you will see both this one and this one. There's possibilities of saying, I'm a 64-bit process, don't show me this thing at all, show me both, show me just this one. I'm not sure if for 32-bit processes there's this possibility. And probably there's other limitations to 32-bit processes, which makes useful for Process Explorer to be available in two versions, Process Explorer.exe 32-bit and Process Explorer 64, which is 64-bit. We can see them side by side in the c:10\bin/sysinternals suite directory. This is the help file. Which can be opened from here. Could be open in the past. This is a CHM file, and there's restrictions on how you can use CHM files because it's a vector for viruses. It's a security risk for Windows, this CHM file format. Okay, let's look at the process properties. All processes have an executable file that they start from. If it's a batch file, then the executable is probably cmd.exe. If it's a PowerShell PS1, the executable is probably PowerShell.exe. So there's an executable file at being run when you double click on a file. Okay, in this case, we can see that it's not running the procexplorer.exe file that we would expect. Instead, procexp.exe, the 32-bit executable, this guy is way larger than Process Explorer 64-bit. So this is 4 megabytes, this is 2 megabytes. Why? Because inside the Process Explorer 32-bit, there's two executables, the 32-bit one and the 64-bit one. We can probably research this thing. So properties, no properties. Let's open the resources with Windows Explorer, with Visual Studio. How do we rename the thing? I always show the extension of files because I'm a technical user. So Windows File Explorer, prop options, view, show hidden files and folders. Yes, show. Hide extensions for known types. No. Display full path in title bar. Yes. Hide protected operating system files. No. Okay, like this. So the file name is procexp space minus copy.exe. Let's rename this thing. Put a .res at the end. Double click on it. I have Microsoft Visual Studio 2022 Community installed. It will open the res file, and in there we should be able to see the included second executable, the one with 64-bit executable. So it should start with MZ, this guy. There's actually two executables in here. We can extract them. Should we put them? So that's 150, and the other one is 152. Both are executables, hopefully. So this guy is the Sysinternals Process Explorer, the executable, the 64-bit executable with valid digital signature. whereas this other one is probably a DLL. It's a sys file, so we can see in properties, details says original file name procexp.sys. So this is actually a 64-bit Windows kernel module, Windows kernel driver. Whereas this is procexp.exe, the 64-bit version. So when Process Explorer starts, it's a 32-bit process. The operating system is Windows 11 Pro 64-bit, extracts these two files in the temporary directory, injects into the Windows kernel this Windows kernel module, the SIS file, and then starts this process procexp.exe from the temporary directory, which we can see in here. This is the temporary directory of the current user, and then procexp64.exe. The command line that was used to start the process is we just double-clicked on procexp.exe in the directory Sysinternals suite. So that's the command line. Just the executable name, no additional command line parameters. We double-clicked inside of the Sysinternals suite. So that means that this is the current directory of the process. The current directory is if you're inside the process, you can run command lines similar to cd to change the current directory. This is the user that I'm using, admin, not administrator, part of the administrator's user group. Okay, we can bring to front. Not really. We can kill the process. Let's see what this verification is. It has started some processes. Sometimes the process will crash because, for instance, it's a 32-bit process and an older Windows operating system, and the handles run out. So there's a limited amount of Windows Win32 kernel objects of type handle can be opened by a process in previous versions of the operating system, Windows operating system, and in 32-bit processes and 32-bit Windows operating systems, the limit was probably lower. This sometimes this number keeps increasing forever, and that's a leak of type handle, so handle leak. I have never used this tab or this one. Threads again was useful for me to figure out what's actually hosted inside of this process, because I can see the DLL name and the C programming language exported function. That's the entry point inside of that DLL for that thread. And these things are really readable for me, like anti-DLL.dll. I know what it does. It's a Windows Win32 API DLL, part of the Windows operating system since Windows 95. RTL means runtime library, clear thread, work on behalf ticket, etc. TCP/IP, this would be the traffic over the Ethernet in my case, that's performed by just this process. Security also very important. This shows privileges. So SE shows, for instance, if we can debug, if we can I don't know, impersonate token, etc. Mozilla Firefox is a process that's probably not elevated as administrator, even if my user admin is member of the local user group administrators. And it also has additional security features and sandboxing and etc. So limitations on what the children processes can do in order for malicious web content to not be able to do damage on this operating system. If you go right-click properties on the parent Firefox process, go to the security tab, and we're going to look at the UACs. We are going to see that the local Windows User Group administrators is denied, whereas the application that we have started and its elevated Process Explorer, so this process, properties on the security tab, it says that the local user group administrators is denied because we're not elevated. Let's elevate Process Explorer. So right click on Process Explorer, run as administrator. Yes. We can see in the title bar that it's elevated. In here it says administrator. And now if you go right click on procexp.exe properties, go to security tab, it says that local Windows User Group administrators is owner. So it says something positive about this ACL row, not something negative. So this is plus, not negative, which is minus. So this says that the current process has some limitations, whereas this says that the current process has some extra powers. Okay, next up, environment. These are the environment variables. When a process is being started on operating systems with environment variables such as Unix or Windows, the child process that's being started is being handled, is being given an environment variable block. For instance, could be the exact same environment variables that exist for the parent process will be available for the child process, or a subset of those environment variables. Very often you need to know what's the environment variable, what are the environment variables for a process that behaves wrongly. Maybe, I know, I had cases where a process could just not start anything, could not even start cmd.exe. Why? Because the environment variable path was not at all what I expected. So not at all what you see in here. In system, and then advanced system settings, and then environment variables. Was not this and not this. It was something totally different. In order to actually see the environment variables of a process without a tool such as Process Explorer, you need to have the source code of that process, edit it a bit, and start a cmd.exe from there, or start a run the command line set from there. This command line. Job, I'm not sure what it is. I have never used this thing. Strings, also interesting. It's 7-bit strings and UCS to Windows style UTF-16 little endian strings that exist in the exe file. I have sometimes found interesting information in here, and I have fixed issues solely by going to strings. and looking at the human readable strings. Most of the strings in here are totally not human readable. So if you ignore all of the ones that are not human readable, you'll go down to a list of maybe 100 strings, and one of them was evidently wrong. You can actually export the list. I have now used this radio button memory. Okay. And that's it. Using Process Explorer, if you're running it in administrator mode, you should know about the process. If it's 32-bit or 64-bit, it's in here, in the image tab, in properties, says image 32-bit. You can show the column image type, it will say 64-bit or 32-bit. You should know if a process is elevated or not. For instance, from the security, look for built-in administrators and see if it's denied or not. And if the user is one that's member of the administrator's user group. Always useful to know the current directory of a process. This could be something really wrong. Your process, if you're writing software, should totally not depend on current directory. Always use full paths. When you start a sub-process, you offer the full path to the executable. Don't use some relative path. Don't depend on where people usually start your process from. Command line, always useful to inspect. Path, again, in this case, we expect that procexp.exe runs from, is loaded from this directory, but no, it's loaded from the current, from the temporary directory of the current user. So not from this directory, but from this directory. Okay, we saw how to find, and then there's two more functionalities. Show hide lower pane, this button shows handles, which are processes, but of different types, not just of type file. We would expect that these are files, but also directories could be open, Windows events, Windows registry, keys, mutexes, semaphores, threads. Windows Station is the graphical user interface session. So session 2, because we're connected via the remote desktop protocol. And if we look at a service, it's not using a graphical user interface. So Windows services should use should be segregated away from the interactive graphical user interface sessions and Windows stations. DLLs are the files that are right now loaded into the process. Maybe some of these DLLs have been loaded lazily. Just by looking at which DLLs are dependencies of an executable file, that's not giving you a complete enough image. You actually want to start the process, run a ton of functionalities through the process, and then look at what DLLs are loaded now into the process. Okay, and then threads. This is probably the least interesting one. And when you want to investigate why a file is in use, you're probably going to use this button, find, handle, or DLL, Control-Shift-F. Let's see an example. we have this directory, c :/10\bin/1. Let's try to delete it. Right click, this trash can icon, delete. And it says that it cannot delete the file. And the messaging is incomplete in the sense that the message is shown by Windows Explorer process. It could easily have said that the process with such and such process ID, such and such executable name, such and such command line has this directory opened in use. But it doesn't say, which forces me to go to Process Explorer. I start Process Explorer elevated as administrator. Then I click on the button for searching, find handle or DLL, Ctrl+Shift+F. And in here, I paste part of the path. So this is the full path of the directory. I can search, for instance, for 1, but then 1 is just a character. It's going to find it millions of times. \1 is also good, but it will find it tens of thousands of times. But if I go bin \1, that's going to be extremely few results. Search. It shows just two processes, not just two process IDs. One is this guy that's changed into the directory, so Windows Explorer. But I'm using Windows Explorer to delete, so I guess not Windows Explorer is the problem. Windows Explorer will know not to keep this file in use while trying to delete this directory. So I guess the only other one possibility is PowerShell.exe. By clicking on the search result, automatically jump to the correct process in the process list. You can go right click and properties, bring to front. It says that no visible windows found. Yes, because this is a command line application. This is the process that has graphical user interface windows. Right click properties, bring to front. We can immediately see that in this Windows Terminal graphical user interface application runs a PowerShell command line shell that is changed into this directory, c :10\bin/1. That's why we cannot delete the directory, because the directory is in use by the PowerShell shell. So a simple thing to do is to just go up one directory. Let's search again. And nope, PowerShell is not changed into that directory, but it still keeps the directory \1 in use. So we must close the PowerShell process in order to be able to delete the \1 directory. And now we will be able to delete it. Try again. And this time it works. The directory has disappeared. Most often, this is when you use the Ctrl+Shift+F, find handle or DLL. When you want to see why you cannot edit a file or delete a file or move a file. Why? Because in Windows, often the read operations, write operations, etc., change directory operations will lock files. Locking files is not common on Unix, but is very common on Windows. This is why installing the simplest of updates will require that you restart the computer, because some file might be in use. Or that's why it's really complicated to uninstall software. Many software applications, when you uninstall them, will actually require that you reboot Windows, because files are in use. That's why you cannot easily make a backup of a database storage file. There's all sorts of limitations created by the fact that usually processes and Win32 APIs will lock files when doing simple operations. That's why you cannot delete an executable that is running as a process right now. Okay, so this is similar to ls-off in Linux, but filtered by this process ID 6664. It shows all of the files that are opened inside of the process. But files are more than just files, are also again the directories, events, serial ports, null device, parallel ports, etc. In here you also see other things which are similar to files, which are Windows kernel object handles, such as Windows registry keys and mutexes, semaphores, threads, etc. The fact that it shows a ton of information from many sources into this tab in handles is great, because this search button, Ctrl-Shift-F, will search in the tab handles for all of the processes and in the tab DLL for all of the processes. That's what it says, handle or DLL substring. Or maybe sometime you want to delete a DLL or upgrade it, and you cannot because it's in use. Another type of actions that Process Explorer has, so features, is as a drop-in replacement for this application, which is called Task Manager. This is the application that you know, that you're using for killing processes and looking at the CPU consumption. So this is the default application that's part of the Windows operating system. It's called Task Manager, and this one is called Process Explorer. In Process Explorer main menu options, you can say replace Task Manager. So from now on, whenever you start Task Manager, this Process Explorer will start instead. This checkbox, replace Task Manager. And then the functionality that you see in here is probably available and much more in Process Explorer. Let's see some of these functionalities. So right click, properties. Properties just shows properties for a file, whereas this shows processes for process properties. You can go like this. Erase it. Then other functionality that exists in Task Manager, you can sort processes. That's also available in Process Explorer. All of the columns that are available for Task Manager should be also available for Process Explorer. And 100 more. You can reorder columns. You can kill a tree or a process tree. So that's kill process tree. Different wording, but the same effect. Then there's priority. You can increase how much CPU is provided by the operating system to the given process. The same thing. The wording is again different, but the effect is really similar. Mini dumps. This thing, you can create mini dump, but also full dump. This creates, I don't know, let's see, what is this? 300 megabytes. So this is probably a full dump, I'm going to guess. Let's see the OneDrive process. Create memory dump. .400 megabytes. whereas this is just 7 megabytes. So the functionality for creating full dumps is available in both applications. The functionality to create mini dumps, I don't find it in the Task Manager. It might be here, but maybe it's hidden. Search online properties, go to services. What would go to services mean? Let's see. So right click on this thing, go to services. Very powerful feature. Let's see if this thing is available. So Windows push notification user service. I don't know how to get to that functionality, but again, it's available in the tooltip. It says Windows push notification user service. It's not clear to me what Microsoft names in Task Manager by apps and background processes, how it groups them. I have always known what a process is, so this is what processes are. There's an executable, there's a full path, there's a command line, there's a process ID. A user that's running the process, and then per thread there might be different things like different users per thread, different thread capabilities, etc. Security. And that's about it. Search Online is available in both. Search Online. So Process Explorer is a superset of the Task Manager, can replace it. You can use always Process Explorer, never Task Manager. There's also this functionality to just replace it. But then there's way more features in Process Explorer than Task Manager. So you can see all of the DLLs loaded in all of the processes and search through them. You can see all of the files, Windows registry keys, etc. open in each process and search for them. You can look at the process tree. I'm not sure where the process tree is in here. And this additional functionality to find a process. Has found Task Manager. Task Manager is not child of any process. That's not that great. It should be a child of win-init.exe. You can also create mini dumps, not just full dumps. You can log out users. This functionality is also available somewhere in here. In the Users tab in Task Manager. So this anti-penultimate tab where it says Users. You also have the possibility of logging out a user. This disconnect button. So this is it. Process Explorer, graphical user interface application, easy to use. If you're a developer, you've probably used Process Explorer a ton of times. Do know that it has additional features. Whenever you need one of the additional features that are available in Process Explorer is the go-to tool because it's a graphical user interface tool and easy to use. Some of these functionality, yes, it's exposed by other command line processes. that might not be part of Windows, built into Windows, might also be part of the Sysinternals suite or somewhere else. But if you know the list of functionalities in Process Explorer, whenever you need one of its functionalities, it's a good place to start in Process Explorer. Maybe you can get the answer to your question right away in Process Explorer. Maybe you're going to get additional ideas by looking at the full picture of a process, why the process is behaving wrongly, why it's using too many resources, why it's leaking handles, etc. So good place to start when you're investigating issues, a good application to manage processes. This is it. This was how to use the Sysinternals suite application Process Explorer procexp.exe from Microsoft. Thank you.